Welcome to Nerd, a podcast where we geek out on a different nerdy subject every month. It's one part reminiscence, one part historical deep dive, all nerd. Today's subject, the hit Nintendo Entertainment System game Punch-Out!, or, as we knew it growing up, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!. The 17th best-selling NES game of all time was a huge part of the host's childhood, even being an origin story for one. We'll go over the game's amazing history and give insight into how to be a better boxer, including what type of music to listen to. Spoiler, it isn't Beethoven. Special thanks to Sidekick42 for providing the amazing NES homage artwork for today's episode. All right, let's ring the bell and start the show.
Nerd! That's our show now. We changed the name.
We're ripping off Facebook, drop the shut up, just nerd.
Well, I think it really also comes down to the fact that somebody had shut up and they hadn't been using it.
Incorrect, but show was Shut Up Nerd, which was the title I suggested. And it turns out there's another podcast with that title. Now, the thing is, everybody's got a podcast. There are a million titles. You can reuse the same title without issue, except I happen to pick the title of one that was successful and weekly and never going to beat that in SEO. The other one you were talking about there is Effing Nerd, which I'm really looking forward to. You definitely have to promote that when that comes out. That one is taken, but it's taken by someone that stopped updating in 2016. You can take that one with, fine. It doesn't matter in that. Yeah, exactly.
We're nerd.
Yeah. Well, nerd is good.
We're knocking it out of the park here. Of course, you may, if you're listening, you know that I am Jeff May. I am your co-host along with Nerd Numbers himself, Dre Alvarez. Dre, I'm very excited to do this episode. This might be my top NES game, or in the high top five.
Oh, 100%.
It's the game I play the most, or the second most on the NES Classic, right behind Dr. Mario.
Very good. So the game we're going to be talking about today is Punch-Out! There are two versions, and we'll talk about both, rest assured. So Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Is the original, the one that I remember nostalgically from my childhood. The one that you'll play on your Classic and I play on my Switch is Punch-Out!, but it is arguably the greatest boxing game ever created. And, to anybody in the 80s, just remember.
Yeah, it's funny that we say that when it's not, but it is.
Really? So what's a better boxing game?
I think Knockout Kings.
And is that that Dreamcast?
I believe it came out for Xbox One, or like the first Xbox, I know, is what I had it on. So in that regard, I'm going to guess that I think it was an EA game before they lost most of the licenses because they were chasing Madden the whole time. But Punch-Out! Is, I would say, the granddaddy of true boxing games. There were some not great ones that we had seen in the past with, Atari boxing and stuff like that. But Punch-Out!, starting as a Smash arcade hit, moving to an NES game where they licensed Mike Tyson for it. That license went out. And then we got Punch-Out!. I believe that was originally released as Punch-Out! When NES did some re-releases. It was the same time that they released Zelda and Zelda 2 in the gray cartridges. It was like their top list of games, and it was Punch-Out!. And I remember Punch-Out! Was no longer Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, and people were like, why? And everyone was like, it's because he's a rapist. And that was not technically the reason why.
Well, it's fascinating. One thing that's amazing about this game, and there is so much, but let's start on the Mike Tyson part. So that we'll talk game development history. But Mike Tyson himself, this is wild to me because they got a license to Mike Tyson for $50,000.
They did.
And what happened is when they were coming up with the concept for a boxing game, Mike Tyson wasn't yet Mike Tyson. I mean, it was obvious, right? I mean, he had a bunch of he wasn't the champion Mike Tyson, but that's still a huge deal. So he was obviously on his way up. And so they grabbed him before he was able to, would have commanded, in a year or two, if they had approached him, he would have been like, you need to give me in the millions for this. Yeah. But they got him at 50,000 when he was still on his way up. To your point, they have like a 3-year contract with him. And I don't recall if it was before Buster Douglas.
It was
or after. But there were definitely behind the scenes rumblings. For instance, with his wife, there were off the court issues that were coming up.
The Robin Givens interview that is so infamous. Yeah.
So that stuff was coming on, and they were wise enough to go, if we approach him to re-up the license, he is going to ask for a big raise. We're past the prime of the game. The game's already sold. We don't need to do it anymore. So they just dropped him and timed it perfectly. So I'm a big sports guy, and this is one of those cases where you just time a contract perfectly, and it's just remarkable.
Yeah, because you look at it, the contract ends in late 1990. And we see that Tyson Douglas was February 11th, 1990. So really, and then you started to see the decline because, Tyson ended up going to jail. He had gone through such a nightmare with his divorce with Robin Givens and everything like that. So there's a lot of reasons why it just made sense for Nintendo not to re-up the license. They would have been stupid if they did, to be honest.
But just timing both of those perfectly is remarkable. I have a random just boxing question because I was looking this up. Mike Tyson is really short. He's even referred to himself as that. And I was kind of confused because normally when you look at sports athletes, if you look at any of the major athletic ones, so I'm a huge basketball fan. If you go to baseball and you go to hockey, you can see normal looking guys. And the reason they're normal looking is because they have sticks. They basically are allowed to supplement natural ability with other stuff. But Mike Tyson is 5'10" and 220. Because one thing I'm going to comment on when we get into Punch-Out itself is Little Mac's size and the hilarity of the different weight classes and how this boxing league makes no sense. But Mike Tyson himself is somewhat of an anomaly, because when I was looking up a lot of the contemporary top boxers that hold titles, most of them are over 6 feet. Some of them are basketball players, 6'6", 6'7", super long arms.
Yeah, when you look at like Lennox Lewis, I think is probably a paramount example of giants in the heavyweight division. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Watch a Mike Tyson fight from the 80s and see how many straight punches he throws. It's barely any. He is a hook fighter. He's a power fighter. He's what we call an in fighter. He gets in on you. He does that peekaboo style. His hands are up and he would move really fast. So you might have been taller, but you couldn't land on him. He gets inside you. And once Mike Tyson was inside you, once he was, pardon the phrasing, but once he's inside your guard, somebody my height is at a massive disadvantage. Like, I had a huge problem fighting in fighters. Like, I'm 6'4". When I would have somebody come up, if I was fighting somebody 5'9", I knew that I had to keep distance. And I did. My fight in the Golden Gloves, dude was 5'9", 196 pounds. All right. That's not nothing. I knew that I had to keep my distance and I did end up losing because he threw a wild hook directly into my face. Those power shots from people that have such a lower center of gravity, but still that muscle mass, Tyson perfected power shots. He used his entire body to throw these shots. He was unshakable. I still YouTube Mike Tyson knockout shots because they're just so absolutely dominant.
I will say on the YouTube front, watching boxing fights like even Muhammad Ali, people that break them down, those are a real sink. You got to be careful on YouTube, just because you're like, I'm not even a huge boxing guy. The only boxing I cared about was Mike Tyson because of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and the Rocky movies, which that's something, Jeff. But it's so easy to just get caught up and watch this, watch that. They're remarkable.
But if you ever get a chance to watch Marvin Hagler versus Tommy Hearns, if you have a chance to watch that, that is one of the greatest things that you could ever watch on YouTube. It's 3 rounds and it's the 3 greatest rounds in boxing.
Awesome. I got a follow-up question on the height stuff then on that. So we'll talk why, but in the game, you're Little Mac. He is listed, according to Wikipedia sites, etc., as 5'7", 107 pounds. Is that weight discrepancy? Is there any chance that a fighter of that size could be competing against heavyweights?
No.
And knocking him down or surviving even one hit from some of these guys?
No. Because what you're really looking at that point in time, that's below featherweight. So what is that, flyweight? I honestly don't even know what the, so that would be flyweight. He's a flyweight. These are guys that, if they're going to fight somebody like 220 pounds, I don't know, because they're not going to be doing much damage, I guess, against a heavyweight. You might be able to outlast him Ali style, but in realistic world, no, like not when somebody is twice your weight and also a trained fighter.
You could, in theory, win on points if you never got hit. But of course, the premise of the game is you're able to survive up to 3 knockdowns, which is clearly not the case.
Yeah. You could win a decision. Yeah, you could win on points, but man, just one connect would be just brutal. And I mean, I'm sure somebody might say something in the comments like, oh, here's a video of a flyweight boxer going up against a 200-pound man or something. Sure. Okay. But in reality,
not Mike Tyson in his prime, for sure.
But it is funny because my brother and I used to play this game all the time. Even after NES was long gone, we used to play this game, and we would like switch off controllers, over who gets to do what, play who. This was when I was in college, and when I started boxing and I was competing, and he was like, do yourself a favor and throw a big fat uppercut and get punched in the face 32 times before you go down. Which is he's like, just go up and go like, blur, 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 and then block it, do an uppercut and get hit 32. Because that was the Don Flamenco.
Oh yeah. Flamenco, the one you'd
be able to switch out left and right 32 times and he'd go down.
Wow, you've got the count remembered, which actually, okay, I want to take a slight step back. On the off chance I would be shocked if anybody clicked on a Jeff May nerd podcast titled Punch Out and wasn't aware. But if you're not, Punch Out is a game released in 1987. You already said some of this, originally an arcade game. We're talking about the Nintendo Entertainment System game. You play as Little Mac, a scrappy street fighter who's been picked up by a former heavyweight champion. You need all this backstory in old Nintendo games, of course. You are fighting your way through 3 different divisions. I should remember them, but they're WB based, whatever. So you kind of fight through
it's the minor, major world circuits. Okay. And then there's another world circuit.
Once you've completed the game, right?
Well, no, it's like a secret code.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, we'll definitely talk codes. So that's the basic premise. You're trying to fight to be world champion. The ultimate get is Mike Tyson, who was a last second pickup because this game, originally Super Macho Man, not Savage, just Super Macho Man. I wonder if they had to pay any royalties for that. But he used to be the last boss based on the arcade cabinet. He was the last boss in the second arcade cabinet because what's somewhat wild, which we will get to, is this game is perfect in that it is the combination of 2 eras of video game in a very weird way because it straddles the arcade boom and the console boom. And as a software developer, it speaks a lot to me because so much software is you build one thing to do one thing and they come back and go, hey, can you use it for something else? You're like, I guess it wasn't built for that. In the movie Tron, where the super evil computer used to be a chess program, that's more realistic than you would think. Coders reuse code all the time. So very much speaks to, taking something built for the arcade and bringing it to the home market is hilarious. And I'm sure we'll get to some of that.
Yeah, it's great. I knew of the NES game. By the way, very important to know, the NES game was released on my birthday, on my 6th birthday.
You said something about getting Zelda for a birthday. Did you get this for a birthday?
I got this for Christmas in 1987.
Not bad. That's a good one.
Yeah, and my brother and I got stuck on King Hippo for like a while because we couldn't figure out his hack.
Even though when we were kind of talking, one thing that makes this game great is it is very similar to real, maybe you'll tell me how accurate I think, but the boxers do have tells and stuff. And King Hippo's definitely got the one where he raises his hand up and opens his mouth, and that's your tell to hit him in the mouth.
Yeah, but when you're 6, it's a lot harder. Like all the other people, it was much more of like you got to figure out when to get out of the way and you could just hit them whenever you needed to. But we couldn't figure out what way to land on him. It took us a while, and then eventually we got through it.
Nintendo Power, which was the magazine that told everybody how to beat games, essentially came out in response to Legend of Zelda. Punch Out and Super Punch Outs. It's weird. So it goes Punch Out, Super Punch Out, Mike Tyson's Punch Out in that order. So the first 2 are arcade, then this. This came out kind of at the start of the Nintendo era, and this was kind of before guides. So I actually went through some of the first couple Nintendo Powers to see what it says to do. And there's like a question to the editor about how to beat Mike Tyson. They're like, I can't beat Mike Tyson. They're like, just don't get hit. You can win. It's like, well, yeah, technically that is true, that is not useful. It's not like a full guide with maps or
Yeah.
diagrams, etc.
No, because it's pattern recognition. And how do you tell, how is a magazine article going to be about pattern recognition? It's not going to be the same. Like it just won't. You kind of like figure it out. Here are your tells. And I remember there were like stills where it would be like, when the gem flashes, that means, like, I remember going through Nintendo Powers and reading that. It's also why I remember the Another World Circuit, is because I remembered the code. I was also going to say that one of the pieces of information that I have carried with me my entire life is 0073735963, which is the code to get straight to Tyson. And 03001087336 is the code to get Super Macho Man.
That is that. Don't you love? I'm in the same boat where you just have like random stuff from childhood memorized. You're like, this, there is nothing good in this, but
I memorize it by tone. Like,
oh my goodness, like the phone.
Like I because I used to like speed enter the code. The 073735963. I used to be like, and people would be like, holy shit, how'd you do that so fast? Like, that was my speed run, was just entering the code to get to Tyson.
So in terms of your history, you're saying you got it as a Christmas gift right after your 6th birthday, which again, super jealous. You're the coolest. I don't remember how I got it, but this was a game I remember owning. And here's what's annoying. My babysitter's husband had a bunch of the codes and I kept asking him for it. He kept taking forever. And I was hoping for the one I needed to know Jeff to get the Mike Tyson code. He only had up to Super Macho Man. And I was like, I don't want to, and I don't think I was able to get by him as a kid. So I remember being very upset. I'm like, I want to fight Tyson. I don't want to do this, but I do remember owning the game, playing it a lot. And this is one I revisited. Let me ask you this. Did you beat this as a child?
I beat this as a teenager, but I did not beat it when I did not beat it in my first run. And that was primarily because I was too young.
It's hard. It's a hard one.
I don't think your motor skills are necessarily that there when you're 6. You know, like you're still figuring out, and video games were still relatively new in the system that we were using. It's not like today where kids were born in it, molded by it, you know. But I did end up finally beating him when I was a teenager, you know, when I did my second run through. And that's when you start to realize things like Super Macho Man's not that hard. But the Sandman is just, he's so hard.
The one tell on the Sandman. So let me give a few shout outs. First, a lot of what we're going to be talking about history is the Gaming Historian YouTube channel, which is fantastic. This is one of those cases where for Zelda, I collected a bunch of links and was like, here, I did the homework. And this is one where I like found another nerd and was like, I'm just copying. I'm not going to lie. Now, I read Wikipedia and other stuff, but I'm saying like this was the first place I found all of the information consolidated. I'll put a link, you know, I put some show notes up for the last one, but there was, I think his like Crab was the guy's name. I can't remember the full name, but I found a really good YouTube tutorial about how to beat the different bosses. And the one thing on Mr. Sandman, I would agree. The last 3 bosses, Mr. Sandman, Super Macho Man, and Mike Tyson. Sandman was the boss of the first arcade cabinet. Super Macho Man was the boss of the second arcade cabinet. Of course, Mike Tyson is the boss of that. They are clearly and expectedly the hardest. The one tell on Sandman is he puts his hands together, and that's when you know you need to dodge. And if you do that, the fight's actually pretty easy. But it is a very quick one. You have a very small window.
Yeah, he's a tough one. Also, the second Don Flamenco, just a brutal monster.
It's funny because when we're talking weights, he's one of the lower weighted boxers, and in the second one, he's just an Iron Man. He's very rocky, right? He's not super hard. You knock him down, he gets back up. You have to really, really hit him to knock him down. He is really, really stingy with the stars. They are there, but even some of the walkthroughs, the early ones, you know, the newbie ones, because the expert ones are much different. But the newbie walkthroughs are very much going, if you aim for the star here, you really run the risk of getting hit. If you just play it safe, you're going to win this fight in 2 rounds, no problem. But I would agree, he's the one that is kind of unforgiving. And if you kind of get on tilt, you get knocked once and you kind of lose your pattern. Like he'll lock you down just because you missed the pattern, he'll hit you down. And
that's something to know about this game, is how pattern based it is. And they really do a good job of, I think, sort of just increasing it just by enough each guy. Because like, for example, when you're on the minor circuit, you're giving Glass Joe and he's a tomato can. and you just go to town on him. And then Von Kaiser, he's a bit more rhythm based, but also incredibly easy. You can figure out, you stun him with a straight punch, and then you give him a star punch or an uppercut and he does that, and then you just send him right down. And then Piston Honda, you get your first like, okay, this is a little bit harder. And then it keeps getting, it's, the major circuit's a bit more gimmicky, but it's a good example of the gradual difficulty growing, which not every video game at the time has done. Super Mario Brothers doesn't have it's not the exact increase in difficulty that one would expect.
But one thing that Super Mario Brothers and this game as well, which both had Shigeru Miyamoto on them, they do have what you were saying, like a good tutorial stage. Because the whole purpose of Glass Joe and Von Kaiser are exactly what you're saying. Glass Joe is a tutorial level. I mean, I remember the StarCraft game, there's a tutorial level you can skip, but it's just like, you're just going to learn the controls. You're going to learn to mine. You're going to learn to move characters. You're going to learn to right click. You learn all that there. Glass Joe is clearly there for you to learn the controls if you need them. Von Kaiser, what you're saying, he has a tell, but what's key about his tell is he doesn't stop it. So other boxers, for instance, Mike Tyson at the very end will blink for, I think, 2 seconds. And if you hit him right at the beginning, you can get a star or sometimes knock him down. But if you wait too long, he just lands a haymaker on you and you go down. So Von Kaiser teaches you, okay, here's a tell. You can take advantage of it and get a star. And then later bosses go, okay, well, there's a tell, but you're not going to get as long. So that is a fascinating thing about older game design. And we were kind of talking this about arcade versus home system, where the arcade model was get you to keep wasting quarters. So the original game was you play for a minute a round with each boxer. You just cycle. So the AI gets slightly better each time through. And I didn't read anything. I didn't go deep enough to see if there's like a kill screen on the original Punch Out, but that's the strategy. Whereas this one was supposed to be kind of enjoyable, progressively harder. So in some way, that's like I said, what I'll actually start talking a little bit of the history. So for those that don't know, Nintendo was a game company. They got into small handheld electronics. They got into arcade cabinets. They got into the
trading card company to start.
Originally, like way back. Yeah. And then eventually got into the home console market where, they've ruled on and off for, my entire adult life and most of my childhood. But Mike Tyson's Punch-Out came about because Donkey Kong was such a hit in the arcades. They ordered a bunch of materials for future arcade cabinets. Like, this is our business model. And then that business model crashed and they went,
I wouldn't say it crashed. I would say that they were like, we need to do this because Donkey Kong is so popular. And they forgot that when something is really popular because it's everywhere, people stop buying it because it's already everywhere. So they were buying all these extra supplies without something to supply it with. The demand dropped. So their supply increased and their demand dropped. So they had to figure out what to do with all these extra monitors.
And their easy solution was, hey, let's just put 2 monitors on a game. And they kind of had an interesting thing here where the technology had gotten better in arcade systems at that time to do a lot of cool stuff, but it was still limited. It's kind of funny. It's like they were able to zoom in, zoom out, the exact thing that the boxes are built for, all these different angles, but you were allowed one thing. So that was their constraint. They went, we can't do Donkey Kong again because you can't have a gorilla making these things and lots of things and, lots of barrels coming down and lots of fire. You can have one thing. So what can you do? And that's when they came up with box. They had originally thought racing, and that was too complicated. The person I want to give credit to, let me just make sure, I think is Takeda, and Katawada, like they're a lot of the people that work in this game, huge. The person in charge of Punch Out came up with like the first game for Nintendo and later came up with the Wii. So this
guy's on it.
Amazing. And also Shigeru Miyamoto was on this game off the bench, essentially. He was just doing art.
Yeah, he was just showing up as like a consultant, basically. He just showed up and he was like, all right, I guess I'm just going to do this thing now.
And he did give feedback on like the game design, but really what he did was design the characters. I would say there's a nice combo of him designing some very iconic characters and showing off his skills as a designer, while also just like the weird racism, just like stereotypes.
It's okay. So like, you got to remember too, that in a lot of these things, like stereotyping to a certain extent. I think they were viewing it as archetyping, it's caricature work. And I don't, it's not meant in offense. It's meant to be a caricature of certain type of people. And they went with boxing because Nintendo really, really wanted that stranglehold in America. And America was fascinated with boxing at the time. Like, you got to remember too, like, boxing has been incredibly popular in America for like a good 25 years at the time, since Ali really came in and pushed it, and you had all these, it was like the golden age of heavyweight boxing.
Yeah, it's wild. This happened twice, by the way. We won't go too much in the rabbit hole together, but it is wild that Nintendo caught this with Mike Tyson at like peak boxing. So this is like perfect timing that way. And then later, of course, unrelated, Mike Tyson caught wrestling at peak wrestling when he came in the Attitude Era. So it's wild that
when he came, way to go, Cold Stone.
The one thing, I don't know if you know, so I got to throw this out there and ask if you would ever do this. So Chris Jericho, they did a stage punch, wrestling stage, hate to ruin it for you, but sometimes the staging is you just get hit. Like, people are like, oh, that was scripted. It's like, yeah, and the script was I get hit in the head with a metal chair.
Yeah.
There's no trick. Trick is I got hit in the head with a metal chair. Chris Jericho agreed to let Mike Tyson throw a punch straight at his face and turn it just the right moment. And it looks super real. Chris Jericho said he got a snapshot. Would you ever agree to a stunt like that? Like Mike Tyson saying, I'm going to take a full force punch at your head and trust you to turn at the right moment.
Full force? No,
I mean, you can look it up, but
no, I would agree to doing a kayfabe punch. Where, where he's snapping a jab. No, well, but like because like you can control your power. You can make something look dominant and still not make it be dominant. Soft hands, we call it. I would agree to that, but
I don't know if that was the case. But even if that was off by a little bit, if he's going fast,
I mean, do I get a pay bump for it?
I mean, I would hope so, right?
Like, that's the thing is, Mike Tyson, because they described, there was a person that was like trying to describe what it was like getting hit by Mike Tyson. And the explanation was put like a phone book, put a Yellow Pages on your cheek, and then swing a baseball bat into it. And that's about the force that you get from a Mike Tyson punch to the head.
And don't try that at home.
I don't,
like a horrible idea.
I don't want to do that. Now, granted, could I have taken it? Yes, I have a very strong chin. That was one of my benefits, but I would not be okay about it. And I would not be the same after that happened. Mike Tyson ended dudes' careers. Like, that dude is wild. So like, knowing it's coming, but trying to make it look real. And if he's throwing full power, no, I wouldn't do it.
But to the point you're saying is like boxing was at its peak. Nintendo wanted, and they timed it. Like, it's just remarkable how they timed it and got it out. And the arcade system got a lot of good press. It did really well. And then the funny thing is, as mentioned, it's two monitors because they just needed supply. So they have too much. The irony is then the arcade business keeps going downhill. The home console business comes up. I don't think we'll have time to get to like Atari crashing that with the buried ET games. So that's a fun story too.
Well, yeah. I mean, Atari crashed the video game system and yeah, spoiler alert, for those of you that don't know, the reason that the NES is called the Nintendo Entertainment System and not video game console is because video game was a toxic phrase in 1985. Video games were considered dead. So Nintendo marketed it as a family play system. They threw a robot in there. Like, they did everything they could to make it so that it was better and different than a video game. And it was just a video game.
And in some ways, this is, again, another one that we can't go down, but that also helps some of like the sexism of video games, because moving it from the electronic section to the toy section definitely had an impact on how it was marketed, who they wanted to market to, what the commercials looked like. I mean, it would be really cool at some point in the future. And I've got all the patience in the world, unlike some of your listeners. At some point, if there's a really cool advertising, video show, podcast or something, I'm sure Nintendo was going to come up with that. So
Nintendo, I will tell you that in the research that I have done, that while Nintendo actually didn't go too far out of their way, they stuck with the family motif. The correct answer is Sega and PlayStation and Sony. They're the ones that went more of the aggressive 90s, like, I mean, obviously the, Sega does what Nintendo don't, and welcome to the next level campaigns. And then Sony really doing these like avant-garde, having Crash Bandicoot like heckle people and stuff like that. Like, it was very weird. The NES systems they would do intense music, but in reality, they really stuck it with like, we're for everybody. Look at us. We're cute. We're chibi.
Hey, you should do a Nintendo commercial.
Look at that. We're Nintendo. Buy our stuff. We have Pikachu.
Oh my God. No notes. Let's film it right now.
I'm buying
the Nintendo. Give them that rule. Film rule, not you. And then, by the way, have you read the book Console Wars about Sega versus Nintendo?
I have watched the documentary and I have the book, and I think I follow the author on Twitter. I think we follow each other.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic about all of this. But luckily, this is Nintendo at its peak right before that, where they get in before Sega and Sega takes over. Like you're saying, capitalizing on the North American market, getting in with boxing, which was incredible and 100% worked. But as I was saying, it went to the arcade. And then the video game system, as you're saying, family entertainment system takes off, and they want to pour Punch Out to it, which makes a heck of a lot of sense. Now, the funny thing is, it's the exact opposite problem, because before they had too much hardware. So they're like, let's give a lot of extra power to this game. And they go, okay, well, you can have it on the home entertainment system, but because that's not a huge arcade cabinet with multiple screens, now you have a lot less power. So in the arcade system, not Little Mac, just the Challenger. By the way, for all of the great work Miyamoto did on the designs of Punch-Out, the original Challenger of the game sucks. I hate to say it.
Well, because he looks like a Glass Joe with green hair.
Yeah, it's 100% it. Just the butt chin and green hair. And it's like, no. Whereas Little Mac is very iconic. I like the look of Little Mac.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about that, the Challenger is it's supposed to be you. So it's not supposed to be a named character. It's supposed to be you. That's why it's the green chicken wire character. Like, you are that character, as opposed to like you are, Little Mac is your surrogate. You are a god controlling this tiny boxer's existence. But in the arcade game, it was like, you are you, and you are fighting these motherfuckers.
Well, of course, in the arcade game, you're standing. It's almost perfect as an arcade game because you're standing up. Miyamoto argued it needed a joystick, not boxing gloves, which is the right call, but you're standing up, and even the motions you're doing with the joystick, you're almost doing a boxing thing. I mean, I could probably imagine doing it in the arcade. You would probably be bobbing and weaving as you were playing.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to the home market, they go, well, you don't have as much power. And their solution was, okay, well, we can't show the wireframe anymore. That's too much. So we can show one boxer, but how do you let the person see the tells? The whole reason there is a wireframe is so you were able to see through your boxer and see the tells. Their solution was, what if our character is super mini? And then they made an in story of, he's the ultimate underdog. He weighs 107 pounds and he's fighting these huge fighters. Yeah, now, of course, they could have just made all of the fighters, in the 100, they could have made them all flyweights, but I think, to the point of keeping it as a boxing game, they wanted to, have heavyweight archetypes and boxers that looked like other boxers.
Mm-hmm. Which I think, we talk about how there was no boxing gloves and that was considered better. I forget what the game was. I think it was Title Fight in 1992. That was sort of it was by Sega, and it was kind of a Punch-Out rip in that you were playing like a green contoured character. But one of the things I actually really preferred is that you had two joysticks.
Oh yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
They had like a guard on there, like a sword guard that made it feel like you were wearing kind of boxing gloves, and you played it like the ways you moved the joystick were the moves. I loved that so much. I preferred that to Punch-Out.
Ooh, I might have to. I'm not going to check that in an arcade cabinet anytime soon. There, of course, now retro places up, but I don't know anyone nearby me that would have that. But I would agree. Yeah, the two-handed makes sense. As a console game, it's pretty good, but it's still not, ideal there. But then that was the solution to that. We mentioned, I got to ask this, Jeff, did I miss a joke on the last podcast? I forget the commenter, someone on Twitter noted that we were talking about the restrictions that a lot of old Nintendo games had. This being one of them, right? The restriction being a lot of the sounds are reused. We noted that Bald Bull and Soda Popinski have the same laugh. Mm-hmm. A lot of the boxers have the same body type. You said there were 4 skins on the last episode. And was that an intentional joke that went over my head?
Nope,
Or
it was an
you just-
accidental. It was an accidental joke. Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure that you weren't being super clever and I missed a joke, which I mean is going to happen regardless. But yeah, after that, someone in the tweets noted that
You got the
hey,
joke
either
of
of
it.
you laughed at this at Jeff saying foreskin. Yeah, as a pain. That's like going down in 90 seconds to Mike Tyson.
Whoops. It's funny too, because Title Fight, I remember like because I never saw Punch Out was like a rare arcade game by the time I was starting to be able to go to arcades. I grew up in a place where the only time I would run into arcade games was either at the local pizza place or when I would go on vacation at some campground that would have like, 2 pinball machines and like a Donkey Kong and a Pac-Man or something like that, or an Outrun. I never saw Punch Out until like the 90s.
I remember you've brought up on the Ugg Fine show with Kim, because I'm from the same area. I'm from Denver, Colorado originally. And there was a place called Funflex, which was this giant arcade with I think, had mini golf, had laser tag. I don't know if it had bumper cars, but one of those kind of places.
An entertainment center. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Interesting. It's almost like it was called that, right? And I do remember seeing Punch Out there. And ironically, when I saw it, I was so excited because I loved the game. And I was like, I know how to play it. So I went on and I was like, what the hell is this?
Not the same.
We talked this with Zelda as well. The sound and music is so different between version 1, which in this case is arcade to home. We've talked, there are transitions from Japanese games to United States. In this case, it was just arcade cabinet to home. But the home console has, this great music going on in the background. I do have to give a shout out. I've got this on here, but Yukio Kanoka, I hope it's either Kanoka or Kanioka, apologies if I'm getting it wrong, is listed as the composer on some of the rabbit holes down like the Nintendo fandom sites. He is listed as kind of the pioneer of a lot of the Nintendo sounds. He trained some of the prolific composers that went on to do, Legend of Zelda, Dr. Mario. He didn't have a Wikipedia page. I don't know why.
I also would like to add that I love that they bit the intro to the game, the that was bit from like old like newsreels, right?
Yeah, apparently this does show up in the Gaming Historian. That was called Look Sharp, Be Sharp by the Boston Pop Orchestra, which was an old Gillette theme. And at least on the Gaming Historian video about Punch Out, he says it usually would play in front of boxing reels. So yeah, this was a Gillette commercial sponsoring old boxing fights. So it's like perfect.
Yeah, it's just so funny. And it really does show like, because these were old. And even if this was being developed in the 1980s, we're talking this is a song from like 30 or 40 years prior that they researched to find that information for, which I think is really rad. Because, boxing reels, you're talking about stuff that was done kind of before the home television market was really popular.
Yeah. So cool. First iteration.
Yeah. Yeah. But boxing is like widespread. And like a lot of times you would see these things in movie theaters.
Oh.
And Nickelodeons. Oh, it used to be. I mean, it used to be that like if you wanted to see the fight, you would either go to the fight or go to a theater or even like a different arena and watch it on screen.
And they a little bit of that persisted. I think it was kind of just before me or maybe I was too young to remember. I mean, they would do like pay-per-views in movie theaters. That's been a thing that used to happen, does happen. And I mean, that was kind of the boxing allure back in the day, as you're noting how it was kind of baseball and boxing are really nice as America's pastimes. And I would note boxing, kind of the exact thing we're saying that made it so good as an arcade game is it is so simple. It is 2 people, right? Mm-hmm. So it is much easier to call, because even a basketball game, if you try and listen to a basketball game or a hockey game or a soccer game, you're just listening for the emotion of when there's a shot or a goal.
You need a really good color person to be able to explain what's going on.
And even then you can't really follow it. I usually just have the box score up, with one of the live feeds going on and seeing what's happening and seeing the last thing. But baseball and boxing happen slow enough that you can listen to those on radio and it's huge. In the arcade one, they just have an announcer that it actually gets really old because, as you noted, I mean, it's easy to do, but the color commentating is very boring because he's just saying, like punch, uppercut, whatever, very boring. You replace that with, the great sounds of the Nintendo and that theme song it just plays, which I'm sure you could probably just do off the top of your head for like 3 minutes if you wanted to, because you have the rest, like you have the entire game in your head.
I do have that entire game in my head. No game is more in my head. That actually, that there are remixes of that song that I actually have on like running playlists.
Very nice. And you mentioned when you do boxing training, I think you said what, electronica and rap, or like were the
no. So it's electronic or disco. So it's either disco or it's EDM. And what it really comes down to is you need something with a dance beat, which is why the Rocky soundtrack is a disco album. And so you need something that you can dance to because you need that rhythm. And unfortunately, as much as in my regular life, I tend to listen more to like alternative rock, outlaw country, and hip hop. Those are the three worst types of music to listen to when you're training for a fight.
Does the Punch Out, you said remix, but just straight, does the Punch Out theme straight work as a boxing training song?
I'm like finding the rhythm in my head right now, and maybe a little bit, but it's better as like a motivational running song as opposed to an actual boxing song. It does keep that rhythm, but that so like those like those might be a little bit off they might pull that rhythm away.
So you're just looking for like a standard 4 count, basically?
Kind of, yeah. You need something that's gonna, but I mean, obviously anybody can do whatever they want. It's just that what's worked for me and has also worked for literally everybody else that has done it with me is that if you find something that you can have a continuous dance beat to, you can find a rhythm and you have that in, and then, you know, getting weird about it, you know. It's not like, hey, find the Beethoven, listen to the Beethoven, which in Warrior is one of my like absolute least favorite things, is how God, what's his name there? Frank.
Wait, is this are you talking, there are multiple Warriors. Are you talking the Mark Wahlberg one?
No. Mark Wahlberg's in The Fighter. Warrior is Joel Edgerton and what's his name there? Tom Hardy going against each other. And
is this the one where they're brothers?
Yes.
And so my wife has watched this one and she liked it. I skipped this one.
It's a perfect movie.
It's a perfect.
You absolutely should see it. You absolutely. But Frank Grillo plays one of the trainers, and he keeps being like, "This is Beethoven. Listen to it. It's Beethoven." And it's like, "Oh, do you like Beethoven? Is that what we're going for?" Fine.
And that but to your point, is that a good boxing? Good boxing, even
Beethoven? It sure isn't. Maybe to calm down and regain your rhythm, I guess, but like no. But also that movie is a fiercely underrated movie. It is a relatively flawless. I mean, Nick Nolte got nominated for an Oscar for it for a reason. Better than any MMA movie has any right being. And I suggest you find the time to watch it.
All right. I mean, I've got a billion streaming services, so I can definitely get around to that. When I'm not, one thing I'm proud of this, only a 24 million gross worldwide. So got great reviews. So I think it's like 8.6 on like the ratings on IMDb. Yeah, not enough people. It's
a pretty fantastic movie, and one of the few movies that I bawl like a baby when I watch it. I cry hard when I watch that movie, and you'll understand why.
I don't want to spoil for the listeners because I know I've done enough. You know, I've talked to my wife about it. I'll read stuff. There have been a couple times I'll be watching a movie with her, and I'll like come in and watch it like for a few minutes and then leave. And, you know, because of what you do professionally and what I do as a hobby, I'm just like overanalyzing stuff. I'll just know what's going to happen. So I'll be sitting next to her and go, I think this and this happens. Then I'll come back later. She's like, how did you know? I'm like, yeah, I mean,
so many telegraph that stuff. Yeah.
There's so many stories you can tell. Yeah.
When I'm watching stuff and I know what's about to happen, I'm like, oh, and she's like, what? And I was like, no, it's nothing. And she's like, you know what's going to happen? I was like, I'm pretty sure I do, but I'm not going to like ruin it for you. And she's like, thanks.
But anyway,
the music. So there are a couple of famous parts of that. Obviously, we have that Gillette, and it all has very vaudevillian sounding music to that, where you come in and like dun 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 dun. You know, you have that, and then you have the training sequence, which is the Burn now. But down now.
It is such a pity we don't have video of that. That was
It's so
some
good.
you rock out there.
Famously and racistly used as one of the most popular
Oh yeah,
videos on YTMND.
there was. So what's that one? YTMMD.
You're all the man now, dog. It was a early stages of the internet, like that sort of like internet 2 after it was dial up. And what people would do is it was like looping images or GIFs with sound over it.
And I'm not saying, neither of us is saying it. I will say something that happened. There was a singer that did a bunch of song remixes. So he would play a bunch of old, and he would either be one person, record himself like 6 times playing a cool melody. And he had a few medleys where he went through a bunch of Nintendo songs, a bunch of Saturday morning cartoon songs. It's really fun stuff. I think he got a real job because it's one of these, YouTube clearly blew up, went viral, and then you're like, oh, it hasn't updated in 10 years or whatever. But when he gets to Punch Out, because he sings the Punch Out, the one you're talking about, it is a slap in the face. Like, what did you say? He's like, I love this theme. And they're like, wait, no, not those words though. Not those words.
Yeah. It's because the scene is Doc training on a bike, and they would say N-word stole my bike. And it became a very popular, unfortunately, a very popular internet, sort of a meme before we knew what memes were. Now, and then we also have the which is
that's
the title now.
Oh, that's both before. And then also don't they end the continue on that when you lose, but then they still end it with a happy note if it's like, try again?
I don't remember that specific one, but I remember.
You're too good at the game at this point. You don't get knocked down third or sixth anymore.
When you beat Tyson, it's like like, yeah.
And he compliments you. He's nice about it in the end. He says
your talks about your finger speed. Your finger speed. Your finger speed is impetuous. You are an animal. You're going to eat my children. Praise be to NES Allah.
On being able to stay on target, or either of you editing that show as much as you do when you both go off, like, I don't understand how one of you stays straight.
Which Tom
and Jeff watch Batman.
Oh, right. I mean, you'd be surprised at how much isn't edited out of that show.
I'm saying I would not be shocked if you told me either of you would just have a breakdown laughing, and you're like, okay, well, we're going to cut, start again.
Whenever we break down laughing, we leave it in.
It really. So you both maintain a pretty good air of professionalism.
We are professional. I mean,
interesting.
If you've listened to Tom and Jeff watch Batman, though, there are times where we're trying to squeeze jokes out in the middle of laughing fits. It is fun. It is a lot of fun doing that show. Tom and I make each other laugh so hard on that show.
And you got, like, if you're a Batman fan, if you're a comedy fan, you got to, why are you here and not there for,
be here. This is fun.
Be both places. Be everywhere.
It's funny because all chemistry is different when you look at like the different shows you get on. Like my chemistry with Adam Todd Brown, for example, on Unpops, is this very playfully antagonistic relationship where we both have been working with each other for so long that we know every beat to take without even know. We know we work really well together. We're like the Sklar brothers. We're so synced up that we just know how to play off each other very well.
You know, not a bad metaphor. Wouldn't have been the first, like, it's one of those, I'm like, that reference works. It 100% tracks. I don't know if it's the one I would have gone with, but yeah.
Well, because they're so ingrained into each other that they know how to play off each other perfectly. And that's, for example, Adam and I, so we don't always crack each other up all the time, but we know something is going to crack somebody else up, and we play that out. Whereas Tom and I, we're a lot more surprising, even though we've been doing it for so long and we know each other's rhythms, we surprise each other with the bits that we come up with because it's such an open-ended world to make fun of and to go on a bit with. So, like, in that regard, like, you never know what rabbit hole is going to come out of Tom and Jeff Watch Batman. We don't. Like, almost every memorable bit on Tom and Jeff Watch Batman is nothing that shows up in the notes.
I mean, I would be shocked, right? If you were going into a show and it's like, all right, Batman's going to go on an adventure with Talia. You're like, okay, so I've got some stuff about Ra's al Ghul, however you want to say it, in the middle. If I was reading a script, I'd go like, Excuse me, Jeff? What are
Yeah,
you
there's no
talking
notes that's like, wouldn't it be funny if Killer Croc was a feminist or something like it, it just things naturally occurred. And then because it's so sort of spur of the moment hilarious, it ends up having a lot of memorable bits in very different situations.
And okay, all this started with you cracking me up with your great rocking out to the music and what might, if they had voiceover on the game, because wouldn't that just like blowing your mind as you beat Mike Tyson's Punch Out, that screen comes up and then his voiceover saying those words.
Buddy, if your first introduction to Mike Tyson was Mike Tyson's Punch Out and you saw what he looks like and you hear the and then you hear him talk later and he's like, I'm impetuous, I'm the greatest of all and you're just like, that is not exactly at all what I was expecting that man to sound like.
And then, I mean, we said this at the very beginning, how he's short. It's like, if you saw Mike Tyson on the street, if he was, wearing just a jacket or something, right? Something that, may hit, you might fool yourself into thinking, he's not so tough. That's what it really, I'm just saying, really ever?
You can tell.
You could tell? Like, I mean,
the way
but you used to be a bouncer, so you're able to tell.
I'll tell you a big hint as to whether or not somebody can handle themselves. Watch them walking, see if their heels hit the ground. If their heels don't hit the ground, they have, generally speaking, some kind of fight training. Because one of the major rules is that in boxing is you never let your heels hit the ground. Once you go flat-footed, it's over.
Oh yeah, because then you basically get planted in.
So you train out to like always have that spring in your step. So I had people that would make fun of me. Even people at like work, they would make fun of me when I was a teacher because my heels would never hit the ground when I'd walk around. And they'd be like, that doesn't make sense. And then it wasn't until one of my friends watched like a Bourne Identity or one of the Bourne movies. And he was just like, man, I was watching the Bourne Supremacy or whatever. And I noticed that he walks the exact same way you do. And then I looked it up and it turns out that he studied how fighters walk. And that's how he would walk through the whole movie.
So was this a Boston friend or a Massachusetts friend? Because it does sound like, hey, it's okay with Matt Damon, so it's okay by you.
I think it's just, of course, it's a Massachusetts friend because it was somebody making fun of how I walked without asking.
Oh, yeah, there's that.
It that way. Somebody I could be like, well, I have bursitis and nasty heel spurts. So, and they'd be like, whatever, you moron. But no, it was definitely one of those things. Yeah. But like Tyson, I think what you're thinking of is he's 5'10".
He's 5'10". I mean, 220, which is, solid muscle.
He's solid muscle. Like if you saw him in a puffy jacket, you might be like, okay, but you'll see stuff like the neck. You see someone's traps being big. You look at their calves. They're like, there's a 0% chance if I ran into Mike Tyson, I'd be like, I could do okay against this person. I've run into people in public where I was just like, all right, make sure that this person doesn't fuck with you because this person will kill you.
In general, it's a good idea not to fuck with people, but you never know.
I've seen it. I've seen stuff happen on the streets where I was like, can I get involved in this to put it down? And sometimes you'd see somebody and you're like, I can't do anything about this person. Like, I've seen it where like these big, massive people causing trouble. And I'm like, man, if I get involved in this, it's only going to get worse for everyone. Myself included.
All right. I was curious about one. So we talked any other thing to wrap up on music? Because I got a few other questions about the game.
I would say that the music is really great in that it's designed to be 3-minute or less chunks. There's 30-second chunks and 3-minute chunks, which is really good when you look at like other games might have longer styles of whatever, something like a Zelda or something where you're in continuous play. This has scheduled breaks. And when I say 3 minutes, it's actually one round is a minute long in real people time.
Because it goes 3 minutes officially, and then there are interesting cases where you want to track the clock, and then there are also weird things. So, for instance, Super Macho Man, whenever he gets up and does a super tornado punch where he spins around a bunch, he stops the clock, and actually that's a tell. You can watch the clock. The clock stops, and as soon as it stops, he's going to be done, and you can hit it in the face.
Oh yeah. I always did it based on the sound. You'd hear a lift at the end. You'd hear the blah, 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 blah. So I music from the blah.
I was going to say, I'm still not ideal at this, but I did in preparation for the show. I kind of mentioned, I think last one, I hadn't beat Mike Tyson's Punch Out. I finally went and did it, and I did it fair. So there is the ability to go straight to Mike Tyson if you have the code. or to use a save state. So I practiced against Mike Tyson, but then I went through the game straight. I had to do it twice, but I had the continue code on Super Macho Man. So I am able to defeat Super Macho Man and then defeat Mike Tyson. And so I'm like, I consider it a win. But I didn't do it cleanly right. I got knocked down. You're able to easily get knocked down 2 times in that first 90 seconds. So those that play the game, Mike Tyson in the first 90 seconds, or as you're saying, it would be 40, it's a minute, first 30 seconds of the fight, so throws these hits. And if it hits you, you're down. If you get through that, he's very easy because he has very telegraphed tells. And in the second round, you can load up on stars really easily, and they're really easy to lift. So you basically get through the first 90 seconds, you get him to very low health. Going to the second round, you knock him down immediately. You pick up 3 stars. You knock him down a second time. He blinks his eyes in the middle of the round. You hit him in the face. You have another uppercut. You knock him down. If you follow a very conservative strategy, it is very easy to beat Mike Tyson around the 2-minute mark of the second round. The pros can beat this game in 2 minutes 20. That's the world record in the first round. And that's, perfect. That's an interesting combination of perfect dodging and also kind of old school video game where you could start hating speed running, because I sent you a speed run one where some of it's just luck of the draw. So as an example, King Hippo, you were mentioning you had a lot of trouble with him. His pattern is he always just randomly will lift his arm and punch you. 3/8 of the time, he will lift his arm, open his mouth. When he does that, you can punch him in the mouth. And you can actually, in the game, I think it's called like buffering. You can just press 8 times straight and you'll just hit him 8 times in the gut. And in the ideal scenario, I said 3/8, you have to hit it. You have to have that sequence happen 4 times. So you could have a perfect run at King Hippo if you had 3/8 raised to the 4th. And I don't know the exact math, but it's a really low number. It's just hitting the lottery.
The number is, it's like 1 in like 8,000 or something like that.
Yeah. So it can happen. And, if you're a professional speed runner, you can get the individual record on it very easily. If you're trying to do a full game speed run, you cannot count on King Hippo on getting a perfect score on King Hippo. That's just no. But all of that, all of that timing and stuff happens. So with the professional speed runs, all of that. But I'm really curious, your tell on Mike Tyson, on you being able to get through it, and like how precise and good you are. Because I'm older, I was able to get through it, but I'm still like, I'm not great at this, but I beat it.
We weren't speed running when we were doing it back in the day. What our thing was and my brother and I, our contest essentially was who can get the furthest without getting touched. That was and like a lot of these strategies are, you have to get hit in order to get the max time.
So actually, on Sandman, as an example, you do a combination of 2 things for the ideal speed run. Weird thing to do: in between rounds, 1 time, you're allowed to press select repeatedly, and Doc will rub your arm really fast. And give you more stamina for some reason. If you do that before the first round, while you're getting introduced, you lose half of your life. And against Mr. Sandman, the strategy is you intentionally lose half of your life. You get hit 3 times and go down. And that's required because the random number generator for him is anytime you go down in the first 2 minutes, he will do a certain pattern on you when you get up. But if you get by 2 minutes, he won't do it. He's not guaranteed to do it. So you need to guarantee you fall down while also getting enough hits against him. And the only way to guarantee that you do that is by starting with Half-Life.
Yeah. It is very interesting because, we would see how far we could go without getting hit. And then if, say, example, we made it all the way up to like Sandman, and then one of us got hit, we'd hit reset and we'd start back over.
Holy cow.
Like that was the game for us. And it was fun. Like I remember because it was an NES. So I remember we were playing one time and it conked out where like all of the graphics turned into like blotchy squares. And my brother still beat the second Don Flamenco without getting touched and got a star punch on him, which was very rare. And I remember, because we weren't doing any of these like skill things that everybody knew how to get the secret stars. We were just, it was random. And I always remember that, and just that exact moment of watching him do that. And I was like, well, shit, how am I going to follow that up where I'm fighting, who's after Sandman after this
second
time Don Flamenco,
right? 3, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was like, fuck. It's like, how am I gonna beat the Sandman when it's all broken squares at this point in time?
And just as more shout outs, what I have to give a shout out is there is a fantastic video by Summoning Salt on YouTube about Matt Turk. So this was kind of interesting in the early 2010s. the speedrunning community for Punch-Out, there was just this iconic person that had all of these top scores. And this was kind of pre the YouTube boom. So I just put them all out. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. You know, you can go to the game, find out the stuff. And he kind of was just the person at Punch-Out and had all of these scores out. And they weren't verified. So it's kind of interesting. But people believe they were legit because he breaks down the strategy and code, as I kind of said at the very beginning.
Yeah.
What's really nice is when you break down the code, it's like, I don't think it's cheating when it goes, okay, well, here's what happens. After 2 uppercuts on a lot of the later bosses, they stop letting you uppercut them. They just dodge automatically. That's built in the code. But you can hack around that by pressing up, fooling them, and then dropping up right before you hit them in the face, because the code behind them says, I have to put my hands up if you put your hands up. I have to drop mine when you drop yours. I automatically dodge when you hit me, but I don't have enough time between dropping my hands and dodging to avoid getting hit. So I get hit. That's how a lot of old collision detection work. But in Punch-Out, it is almost the perfect Nintendo game in that sense, in that the glitches and tricks and all of that match the actual game itself, because yes, you are tricking the math, but the math you are tricking is a math that's saying, I'm supposed to be guarding you this way by watching what you are doing.
It's a feint.
Yeah.
In boxing, it's a feint. It's actually something that when I started boxing and was much younger and much faster, I was actually really good at, which was I would feint a jab to the face and then throw it to the gut. So I'd fake a jab to the head to get their guard moving. And usually at my age at the time and my experience level, we were all very green. And I knew that going in. I knew that we weren't as well tested in knowing how to deal with stuff. So I knew people would flinch a little bit or people would overblock. So I feinted a jab to the face and then I would throw it to the gut. Doesn't do anything. No damage. Jabs don't cause damage.
You got a point, right? Or how does boxing?
Yeah, you get a point, but that was never the point. Not in my points are a lot. I mean, yeah, they're important, but I was a heavyweight and I had a loaded right hand. So I was a knockout fighter. So what I did was I did it a couple more times to make them think that was all I knew how to do, was that one thing. And then on the third time, like a Punch-Out character, I would fake that jab and then I would fake it to the gut and they would immediately drop their hands, which was my goal, to get them to drop their hands. And as soon as they dropped their hands, I would flick the jab back up and come across with a straight right. They had no hands to block because they had already dropped them down to block what they thought was going to be an obvious tell. So feinting is a intensely important thing in boxing. Distractions in any way, the Ali shuffle, where Ali would come in and he'd shuffle his feet to get you to look at him and then start peppering you in the head. Like, these are all things that people do. Feint left, strike right. It's all a part of it. So by adding these little, they're not glitches, but they are essentially punch feints. You're feinting that you're going high, but you're throwing low.
I got to shout this out too. The person who does that video, it's great, is called Summoning Salt. What is incredibly humble about this person is he is the best Mike Tyson's Punch-Out person in the world at this point. It's all the records.
Yeah, he has all the records, right?
But he releases a documentary on this other person, and at any point, it wouldn't even be that vain to go and yeah, when I beat that by 2 seconds, I added this thing. But he doesn't do that. He actually keeps the focus on the person, which I really appreciate. A lot of people in the comments say, because it's a really nice documentary on speedrunning as well as the person. Okay.
It's actually more of a documentary about a community.
Yeah.
Than it is. Because it was one of the interesting things about that is, instead of people chasing glory, you'd see groups that were working together, people that noticed one thing and they would inform somebody on their own. They'd be like, oh, I'm having trouble getting this. And it's like, well, I noticed that if you do this, so try that. And they were working together, which is probably why this Summoning Salt guy isn't necessarily talking about his records, because this story of chasing, well, it's called, and I'm forgetting what it's called specifically. It's like chasing, or the quest to beat Matt Turk. It really took an entire community to figure out how to beat this guy.
And I mean, that both of those on their own are remarkable. And what I'll throw back, because you were talking from the boxing side, I'm from a coding side, a lot of the glitch stuff and all that, when you're saying feints, in code, that's usually side effect. It's like when you're going to have some code run, some stuff's just going to happen and you can't always avoid it, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a lot of the problem with old Nintendo. It's going, if I'm going to have a Goomba that automatically turns right if it hits the wall, well, if you mess with it and I did encounter that, it's going to do something and it's going to look weird. That happens all the time. But in Mike Tyson's Punch Out, when these kind of things happen, the side effect is you get a hit and you weren't supposed to, but that is what's supposed to happen. The feint stuff you're talking about on the Box Score Geeks podcast, another show I do, I like talk chess every few episodes, and I talk Josh Waitzkin all the time. Josh Waitzkin was a chess prodigy that went on to be a jujitsu master. And I forget, it's called like Silent Hands or something, but where they kind of stand really close to each other. And it is fascinating because he wrote a book about that. He was talking the feint stuff too. And it was you're just like him. He's a world champion. Jeff, you and him,
just like
the same.
Basically.
He would say the same thing where it's going, okay, you got your arm on them and they're expecting you to try and push. And so you kind of give a little pressure repeatedly. So they start expecting you to push. And what he was saying he'd do exactly what you do is that you get them ready, you pretend they're ready for it, they tense up, and then they're weak on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And that exact same thing's happened in Mike Tyson's Punch Out, and a community found it, which also is probably very similar to the fighting world, because I know at least with a lot of fighters, right, they have an entourage of people around them that are doing a lot of stuff too. So Punch Out, as we are agreeing, is the perfect boxing experience, except the music's a little off.
I do like Punch Out as a boxing experience, to be 100% honest. Like it's so different because it's an arcade game. Even as an NES game, it's an arcade game. It's turn-based. It's not the same as, for example, like a Knockout Kings, where it's much more of a standard style of boxing itself, of finding those ins and outs and not waiting for somebody and having to counterpunch, where Mike Tyson's Punch Out generally is, until you start doing these speed runs and figure out that strategy. It's just good. And it's weird to me that the Punch Out franchise isn't massive, because it's not. There have been, for home console games, there have been realistically, 3 games?
Well, I mean, it's funny. You're in the same boat. This is the feedback to keep talking and promoting you. You do a lot of great stuff, and you needlessly apologize for advertising, which is what we were referencing earlier. People didn't get that.
Yeah.
Where you're saying, sorry, it's late or whatever. Props to the people in your supporters on the sponsor group that make fun of you for it. But you'll say, I'm sorry, it's late. And then the feedback is, well, I'm doing all this other stuff. And now you've got your fans doing podcasts with you. So it's even less time. When you look at the people that were working on Punch Out and you go, well, why did they make another one? It's like, yeah, they went off and made Super Mario Brothers and Zelda and the Wii. And by the way, the Punch Out came back on the Wii.
Yep.
So I mean, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of times when you see stuff you really like and you go, why did they quit? And sometimes you can look them up and you're like, oh, they didn't quit. They went and did other stuff. And that's the real answer behind Punch Out, why there wasn't more of it.
But it's interesting to me that it's such a I want to say it's in the zeitgeist. Punch Out is one of those games that has cemented itself in the zeitgeist more than other games that have gotten bigger pushes. And you do forget that you're right, that it's not like the demand for it wasn't there. It's just that other things were being made. And when you think about it, because like when you think about what came out of the NES, you know, when you look at like games like Zelda, and how many sequels do you have to Zelda? Final Fantasy, Super Mario Brothers, all these things that have these but like, we seem to forget how big Mike Tyson's Punch Out was at the time, to never get an NES sequel, to get Super Punch Out eventually, which was essentially a synthesis of the 2 arcade games mixed together. Then to wait, another 15 years before we get it on the Wii?
Yeah, there was Super Punch Out on the Super, which you already mentioned.
Yeah, that was 94?
There were... Is that right? I'll take a look in just a sec. And I'm trying to look up. Yeah, so Punch Out was the number 7. This is actually kind of embarrassing. It fell behind World Class Track Meet, but I think the trick with World Class Track Meet was it was bundled. Yeah. So it's one of the top non-bundled, and it looks, I mean, what seems likely, unless I'm mistaken, it sold 3 million copies. What likely happened is they made 3 million, released 3 million, and said, we're good. So in terms of success.
It's one of those things, though, that it's like, well, if they made 3 million,
it outsold Metroid and it outsold Super Mario Brothers 2. So yeah.
Okay, and so Metroid, how many Metroid games?
1 billion, right? And some horrible ones, like which like what you had the Metroid franchise and you did the Samus one, which interesting idea, but poor execution.
They're doing what? They're working on Prime 4 now.
I don't know. I mean, I'm way behind. And Metroid was never. Metroid was never a game I was a huge fan of. I didn't really like that.
So, but you have Metroid, then you have Metroid 2 for the Game Boy. Then you
Super
had
Metroid's
Super
known as like
Metroid.
the greatest, right?
Then you had Metroid Prime on the Cube. And then it just and I believe also like the DS had one. And they're like going everywhere. Like it's all over the place.
Same with the Zelda games, same with the Super Mario Brothers games.
Yeah. So Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, you have 1987. 7 years later, 1994, in September, you get Super Punch-Out.
What was the release date?
September 14th. So
okay, this would have been interesting, Jeff. That just missed my birthday, so that would have been really weird.
What's your birthday?
15.
Ooh.
All right.
And then we had to so it's like we had to keep doubling our wait list because we wait 7 years for a sequel on a new console. Then we wait double that. We wait 15 years for it to release, and 2 consoles we have to skip because we have to skip over. So it went from NES to Super NES, then Super NES to Wii. So the GameCube got ignored to get Punch-Out. And then he shows up as a broken character in Smash Brothers.
Oh, who's your Smash Brothers character of choice, by the way?
No, I don't play.
No.
So here's the thing is that I tend to be an Xbox guy. And also I tend to avoid modern gaming because it is massively addicting. And I can't afford to do that.
Yeah, well, you were mentioning on the last show, the kind of quick one, the nice part about Super Smash Brothers, that is one you can kind of come in and come out, but it is also hyper addicting in that you come in for 10 minutes and you're like, God damn it, that guy knocked me off. Kirby hit me. You played as Kirby and you hit me off. I'm coming back.
Every time I tried to play that game, I always play against people that play it all the time. And I still don't even fully know how to play the game because like the percentages, like where it's like 300% of what? Like when you see like there's like whatever the health bar is on something like Smash, where I'm just like, I don't know what the health situation is in this game. I don't understand it. And that's just, if I'm going to play a fighting game, for example, it's going to be Marvel versus Capcom 2. And God, that's a good game.
Nice. Yeah, I was a Street Fighter 2 guy. Really liked that one and didn't really go much further than those. I remember Mortal Kombat having blood on the consoles was a big deal.
Oh yeah,
but
only on one console though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's
only on Sega with the
Console Wars goes huge in depth on that. Great book, and I actually was the documentary series good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's great. The author is Blake J. Harris, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to finish one other comment on like why not more Punch-Out. And actually, when I was looking this up about the last one that came up, I think it showed up in that video I was talking. The gaming historian, he actually mentions that the guy, and I don't want to get the name wrong, so I'll put it in the show notes, or you can go check the link for Mike Tyson's Punch-Out on the Wikipedia page, was a super high up at Nintendo. So I think it was a case where this was kind of the creation of 2 super higher ups. Mm-hmm. And it might have been that did not have time to work on it or focus on it. And there was I don't want to touch, the people's babies that, aren't mine. So I think it took until the Wii where someone said, am I allowed, can I do this? And the other guy said, I think it was done perfectly, but go with my blessing.
I think that also, I think that was another thing about like the Ghouls and Ghosts franchise is that it kept being like traded off to people or something. Like there was like a problem with that as well, where like not wanting to like insult the original designers and stuff like that. But it seemed to me like such a moneymaker for such a relatively simple, like think about from an animation perspective, how much you're saving on not animating backgrounds the same way.
I'm sorry to cut you off so quick, but on the Box or Geek Show, we talk a lot about economics in sports because that's how we kind of got our start. Mm-hmm. And I hate to tell you this, when you look at big franchises and big companies and you're like, man, why did they do this? It seemed like it would have made so much money. It seemed like it would have been such a good idea. The frequency that fails, including at high levels or even seemingly well-run and smart companies, is much higher than you think. So when you're like, yeah, it seems like a no-brainer. Why did they just want money? And I mean, think about how many movies you all talk about where using rudimentary film analysis. So not to be mean, like you have experts in film that you talk to regularly, went through film school, know all of this, write scripts, etc. And they'll go like, okay, well, a 101 way you could have improved this script, Dave Bell does this all the time, is this. And you're going, so you're telling me they gave this $100 million budget and then scrimped on, a a script writer that you could have gotten as an intern from, USC for 20,000 or something.
It is really one of those things where I get that, but also at the same time, it's such a tried and true moneymaker. If you're looking at Mike Tyson's Punch-Out or Punch-Out in general, selling what, 3 million copies? Let's say for the sake of argument that 2 million of those were sold at full retail. So that would have been what, $60?
Around there, right?
So you're looking at 120 million. Then we'll say, let's pretend that the Punch-Out re-release in 1991 or 1990, which sold, I believe they sold them for 20 when they came out. So let's say another million. So it's another 20 million. So you're looking at 140 million for that. That's proven success.
And again, I didn't think I was going to get this in, but let's throw out another thing. So one of the tie-ins Mike Tyson's Punch-Out did was with Captain N. One of the worst television. I don't know.
Shut your mouth. Shut your goddamn mouth.
Okay, listen. So Jeff, we grew up on the same shows. Like I want that clear. Like He-Man, Captain N. I love these, and like with both of them, when I have revisited, it's rough. But there is stuff I revisit. One of your hot takes on Tom and Jeff Watch Batman is that Batman the Animated Series is not as great as people remember. Now, you're very repeating you, so tell me if I get your thesis wrong. But you basically point out it was amazing, it was groundbreaking, it has some flawless episodes, but it has a lot more bad episodes and misses than you might remember.
A lot of
people,
yeah.
And a lot of that happens with our childhood, where you go back, and in some cases, you go back to Batman the Animated Series, and you're like, okay, this isn't as clean as I remember, but oh my God, this is brilliant. And there's some stuff you go back to from your childhood. I would say He-Man just skirts that line into that so bad it's good. It's still enjoyable, but it is
He-Man's rough. He-Man is, for something that I am surrounded by from a decorating and collecting perspective, I am very aware of how not great He-Man.
When the box set came out, I was so excited and I bought it. And the one good case of it is me and some friends went to a party where we got drunk. And when you're drunk, that is hilarious. I imagine when you're high, that's hilarious. But like trying to watch that sober, I couldn't. And I ended up just giving it, I mentioned I moved cross country. I just gave it to my brother. I was just like, yeah, I don't need it. I'm not even going to transfer the disc to my, portable cage. You have it, it's pretty, right? You can, the DVD set, the box art is pretty. So put that on your wall. I was like, I've had enough. I still need to watch the new one, which is apparently pretty good. You were mentioning that.
It's all right. Yeah. Well, it's because they gave it a plot.
Oh, interest, as opposed to just like, I think there are ones where Skeletor at the beginning just said something. It's like, I've done it. Like, done what? He's like, I'm going to fight him. What are you talking about, Skeletor? But anyway,
I'll get him.
That's pretty good. You got some good sounds from the 80s, Jeff.
Well,
it's a bunch of ringtones. But Captain N, horrible TV show tie-in. So we're talking about like, how did Nintendo mess up Punch-Out? Well, if you look at Captain N, the premise, by the way, for those that don't know, is this stereotypical high school. I can't tell if he's supposed to be a jock or a nerd, but he's wearing a Letterman's jacket. It's like got Nintendo.
And it's got an N on it.
And I don't know if that school's supposed to be N or it's for Nintendo, but the insinuation is he's Captain Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, they made a smart move. So Captain N is actually a very smart sort of existence because they couldn't put the word, you'll notice the word Nintendo is not used at all in the title, in the music. They never mention Nintendo. The reason for that, and I would like to shout out, I think I got this information from Dan Larson. If you follow Toy Galaxy or you watch their stuff, he does really great, sort of 25-minute deep dives on history. He's very entertaining. And also he's a professional nerd from New England. Huge fan. He brought up that because of the regulations that were reestablished in advertising for cartoons in the 90s, after they sort of had to start undoing a lot of what Reagan was doing, they skirted around making this essentially a commercial for Nintendo by never mentioning Nintendo and saying, you can't say that we're advertising Nintendo when we never even mentioned the product.
Is that also, okay, so I had another comment on that. So in the beginning, he's playing Nintendo, he's playing Punch-Out. Ironically, same boxer, you said you had a problem with King Hippo. He's terrible. He's down to one hit away. King Hippo has not landed a hit on King Hippo. He's in round one at about 2 minutes.
Game master my ass.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then he's supposed to be sucked in to help out to, I don't know, Mother Brain's doing something. briefly looked it up, Jeff. I can barely remember.
It's the multiverse
Tron, basically,
of
right?
NES. Yeah.
It's Tron plus a Nintendo multiverse, right? He gets sucked into the machine to help them defeat the evil thing.
Yeah.
But when he gets sucked in, he's playing Punch Out and getting destroyed, and his dog is watching him. When they get in, King Hippo is a character in the game. They have a picture of King Hippo in the intro, who, is tan colored. He's supposed to be from a made up island. When you get into the game, he is blue and has a crown. Which, I guess he is a king, but, wasn't
he
in
has
the
a
game.
crown in the
Does he have the interstitial?
In the stills, yeah, he does.
Okay, all right. So I guess I'll give him to that. But he looks a little different, and Mega Man looks a little different. They all look a little off. And is the logic that they use maybe to go, these are characters inspired by, they're not the actual characters? Same idea?
I think it's more taking, because Mega Man is actually looks a lot like, sort of, if you were to look at Mega Man's sprites on like the early NES and like synthesize the Mega Man box art with the Mega Man gameplay. Because remember, he's an Astro Boy, he's an android. I guess he makes sense. The big thing with Mega Man is he had like a visor, and he was short, and he was like more of like a greenish, and he had a visor. I'm guessing
it was green, was he? I thought he was like human colored, or am I wrong? Or are you talking on the show itself? Okay, that's what you're saying.
On Captain Ant, his armor was kind of greenish, right?
I think that's right. Yeah, he didn't quite look like Mega Man. And that's there is a Punch Out overlap where they go to Punch Out World because they're training for an Olympics, and smart things the enemies do, and they're fighting for an Olympic fight against our heroes, and they just bring Donkey Kong, and that's a good idea. And it's really hilarious because I watched way more of this than 5 minutes, which was too much, but I watched 5 minutes of the episode just to get like, what's it about? And they're trying to cheat to beat the heroes while they're pulling a heist. And then the underlings to Mother Brain are going, we can just beat them. Why do you want us to cheat to win? But when they're training in the Punch Out gym with none of the other Punch Out characters barring King Hippo. That's kind of the one multiverse overlap with Punch Out.
Because there was King Hippo. King Hippo was a lieutenant in Mother Brain's army, along with Eggplant Wizard from Kid Icarus.
And Kid Icarus is a character in the show as well.
Yeah, which is not his name. His name is Pit in the video.
Really? Huh.
The character's name is Pit. They call him Kid Icarus, which is the name of the game. Simon Belmont looks nothing like Simon Belmont. They basically made him kind of look like he kind of reminds me, the energy that he brings is like a deflator mouse from The Tick.
Oh, yeah.
Like an all bark, no bite, kind of super vain, but not very useful. He's like the anti-Indiana Jones kind of a thing in there. Whereas, in the video games, he's a stoic warrior wearing like goldish plate armor or something like that, or whatever. It's so different, but that's okay. You want to take artistic license. You want to make things, they don't have to necessarily look exactly the same. Mega Man had its own very great cartoon I remember seeing it on Sunday mornings a couple of years later.
Yeah, I mean, Mega Man was good. I think there was also an overseas one that was good. One of the most infamous things about Mega Man, I made a tweet about this, where you take the box art from the original, the North American box art. It is one of the worst transitions ever. And I compared it to, the famous statue of Jesus that gets messed up.
Yeah, Mega Man's box art is wild. And then Mega Man 2's box art, they just made it look like a weird Logan's Run-esque energy where he's just got like a pistol.
Yep.
And it's very funny. Mega Man box art is classic. And I do hope at some point in time we will cover Mega Man.
Well, I was going to say, I know pre-show we talked, you were pretty loaded. We got to the tangents I wanted to and got through all the subjects, unless you had, there might be one or two songs you haven't done from the game. So is there anything else you want to end? I have one ending segment that we can, kind of do the wind down.
No, it's good. Like, this game is one of those games that I'm actually flabbergasted that it took 7 years for a sequel and then another 15 years for a second sequel. I understand that they were out doing things, but I'm sorry, but an N64 Punch-Out game would have done well, like better. They were working on Pilot Wings?
N64 is definitely one of those where it didn't have the same total, but some of the hits from there, including Ocarina of Time, we've talked about play, but it's amazing. Ocarina of Time, Super Mario World, GoldenEye, Star Fox, you could probably say like those four, like
they had a toggle. They could have done a punch out game with a toggle, meaning it would have been a lot better for like the movement of the character. They didn't do that. And I'm really bummed that they never did. I think a game like a game with a toggle, like a Mike Tyson's Punch Out game with a toggle, which we never really got, because remember when it got to the Wii, you're using Wii things, which has a toggle on one of the secondary pieces that you get, but it's motion based.
And actually, that's for one little like quick thing for speedrunning. There is like a fake toggle, and that's one of the keys behind the game. Is basically you press left and you immediately press either up or right to reset quick. But it really does a number on your thumb. Actually, I'll say, like, my thumb was getting sore when I went through and beat it, again. So there we go. Okay, so Jeff, I'm going to use the Mega Man thing in a second as a nice outro, but I want to end with one last segment I had for the show that I had planned. So Doc Lewis is a boxing trainer in the game. You too are a boxing trainer. One of the parts of this game is in between rounds, Doc Lewis gives advice. So I'm curious, as a boxing professional, your opinions on his advice. Okay. This is from punchout.fandom.com, by the way.
All right, give me the advice. I'm going to close my eyes and picture it. I'm in the middle. I'm after round one.
Okay. Who are you fighting? Who's this advice after? Something that'll be obvious. I think
I'm picturing it against just anybody that I'm. Okay. Just another.
All right. Stick and move.
Yeah, no shit, dude. Yeah, no, I get that.
All right. Next one. If you love that, you're going to love the follow-up. Put him away.
That is good advice if you're not noticing that somebody's about to drop. And the advice, sometimes a coach needs to see something, and they might know that, in a war of attrition, you need to be on the offense right now because he will drop. So that means they're about to go.
I have another weird college story somewhat related to that. So in college, stupid college kids, somebody brought boxing gloves and they were doing hall boxing. And I went and did it. Now, this was a very Mike Tyson's Punch Out, because I think I was, 200 plus at the time. And whoever I was fighting, I think he was probably 150. But we went for one round, they did do 3 minutes. And I was just gassed. It is amazing how much energy boxing takes out of you, especially if you're an out of shape computer nerd. And I knew, I was like, I'm not going to make another round. So I just went out and swung hard. I actually feel really bad knowing all the CTE stuff now in hindsight. I hit him. We were in dorm walls, the dorm room. So it's not a boxing room. Knocked him. He hit the wall and went down. He got back up. So, at least it's not full, but probably still wasn't good. No. But I was briefly a boxing champ in my dorm hall, which was very atypical. And it actually confused my friends, because when I went out to dinner, the people on the same floor were cheering me. They're like, what are they talking about? And I was like, I'm a boxer, but want to know. That's all I did.
Well, you got that in there. Yeah. It's such a different thing to see when you see those like kind of tough manny fights where people that don't necessarily have a lot of experience are throwing, and they throw those wide shots. And as a boxer, when you see it and you're like, I would kill these people. You have to it's very hard to stay away from those kind of events, because you're just like, I don't want to.
Well, I don't know if I don't know if I'm breaking kayfabe or if he's being serious, but on some of the unpopular opinion shows, when you talk with Chet Wild, he'll joke about boxing you and surprising you. And it is a lot of, as with many athletic things, you're going, the difference between someone who has trained and done this and an amateur is so vast, especially when you count the height discrepancy between you two. It's like, no, there is no world where you would be able to compete, where Chet Wild would be able to compete against Jeff May at all.
But
again, that could be joking.
It's a full joke, because when you talk about
right, he has to know, right?
Brian Scalabrine, yes. Brian Scalabrine made a great reference. If you don't know Brian Scalabrine, he was sort of like an official bench player. He was very popular because he took the nickname White Mamba. He was just a big, tall, goofy, white, gingery dude that played for the Celtics. He was like their mascot. And people would always try to challenge him to ball. And he said in an interview, or I forget what it was, but he's like, you need to remember, I'm closer to LeBron than you will ever be to me.
So that I've actually written about that. That was the Brian Scalabrine challenge.
Yeah. And
it was where he found 4 basically college players that were good and played them one-on-one. And I think he destroyed them, something like 40-4. I think they only scored a combined 4 points. Funny boxing story. When he talked about the behind the scenes, he actually said, as a professional basketball player, it's not all about athleticism. You look at Brian Scalabrine and you think, oh, I'm bigger than him or I'm stronger than him. Not many people taller than him, of course. And he's going, what he has learned over time is detecting feints, detecting tells. That's what basketball players are doing, right? Like the really good ones are boxing, where they're feinting with their left hand, so you get tripped up. Of course, Allen Iverson has one of the most infamous overletting Jordan, where he
Jordan's ankles, basically. The other thing about boxing too is it's a lot of geometry. I mean, basketball. There's so much geometry to it that people don't necessarily understand, that the immediate quick thinking of geometry, the equations that people do in their heads to take a shot, I don't think people understand that.
And it's interesting. You said geometry. I'd be curious. I mean, boxing seems similar, right? You're talking about hooks or where you want to be or placement. So, I mean, boxing wants a general ball, quick thinking on spatial reasoning.
Boxing is a lot of 50% planning and 50% reflex. And when you talk about the mental game. But yeah, put them away. That's not bad advice if you don't think you're winning and they let you know, like, you better hurry up and put this guy down. He's about to drop.
All right. I'll try and get through the other ones without a 10.
Here we go. We got it.
Dancing like a fly, bite like a mosquito.
Just the Pepsi version of what Muhammad Ali said.
Yeah, exactly. He says, I don't want to get sued. All right.
Yeah.
Keep your guard up.
That's good advice. Especially if you are someone like me with heavy hands, that sometimes you forget. Like, I'll watch video, because I'll do video when I'm boxing. I'll take video sometimes of me doing heavy bag stuff. And I'll notice that, like, sometimes, especially late after a workout, because I do the videos after my actual workout, that I come in and I'm throwing my jabs from my shoulder when I should be throwing them from my kind of like my cheek. And that means that if I'm throwing them from my shoulder, that I'm not protecting the left side of my face.
All right.
So keep your guard up. That's good advice.
Okay. Watch his left.
I mean, if he's throwing, I mean, you should always be watching their lefts, but yeah, right. That's fair. The lefts are generally the jabs and then the power shots on there. So yeah, I mean, that's standard advice.
Okay. 1-2, 1-2 punch max.
That would be, I guess, good if you know that the person isn't recovering well. So if somebody is a fighter and you know that they're not good at getting their hands up. So a 1-2, 1-2 is a good straight combo of doing damage and then allowing yourself to escape. So it's quick damage followed by a step back.
All right, I'll take it. Okay, listen, Mac, give him a fast uppercut when he's stunned.
I mean, that's good advice, but that's pretty standard. Yeah, give him an uppercut when someone's stunned. Yeah, we hit them when they're stunned. Yeah, that's good advice.
All right. Listen, Mac, dodge his punch, then counter punch.
That's good. Again, it's standard advice. That's more of a training thing than anything. Dodging is different. It's different. I wasn't a dodger. So I was a heavy bag when I would fight. I take a lot of damage, but I give out more. And because of my size, there are certain moves that I'm not necessarily good at. We talked earlier about Mike Tyson when he would do the peekaboo where he'd move around and stuff like that. At my height, that's me offering you my head, because I'm so tall that dipping isn't necessarily a smart thing for me to do, because I was generally fighting people that were 2 inches shorter than me. So dipping means I'm making myself more accessible. So dodging is, dodge then countering. That's not bad advice, but dodging in of itself it's one of the harder parts of boxing.
For Little Mac, that's like the only strategy that has any hope, because even that's what's funny is even at his size, and this happens in the game sometimes, you're allowed to block, which would break your and your brother's rule about not taking any damage because you take a minute about. That's misleading, because it's like if Little Mac does this to Mike Tyson, which by the way is one of the strategies, one of the last fight against Mike Tyson in round 2. You block, he punches you, you jab him in the stomach, you get a star. You're allowed to do that. In reality, if Mike Tyson punches you, even a jab, at that, you're taking damage.
You're 107 pounds for sure. Yeah.
All right. Listen, Mac, catch him off guard to stun him, then unload on him.
And I mean, again, that's standard training, but the idea of getting someone stunned and then being able to just go after them. It's funny because combo fighters, when you look at heavyweight fighters, for example, Muhammad Ali is a combo fighter, somebody that unloads on them. Whereas when you look at somebody like a Tyson, or even past that, when you look at somebody like a Lennox Lewis, these are power men that damage you. Like Ali never really had like one punch knockouts. So he was a combo fighter that Little Mac would also be like. Ali wasn't particularly strong for a heavyweight, whereas Tyson, Lewis, people like that absolutely are. So in that regard, yeah, you might. I wasn't a person that threw a lot of combos. I was a lot of unloading combos. I was power.
So what we're almost saying here is that if Doc found you and offered to train you, he'd be kind of a use at this point. He's like 50-50.
He might bring me into a style of boxing that I wasn't used to.
These next two, yes, you can, Mac, and hang in there, Mac, in response to I can't win, Doc, and I'm tired, Doc.
Yeah, I mean,
that's reassurance.
Yeah. I mean, that's his job to do that. But sometimes you get a Roberto Duran situation where you're just like, I don't think I can keep going. Like
the 30 for 30, the what is it? I can't remember what it's called. I don't know if it's called.
I think it's called No Mas.
Oh, No Mas. Yeah, it's great. I love that one. And I also love watching boxing documentaries where you have fat, out of shape old guys like, man, he was just, this guy, he not athletic enough. And you're like, yeah, good analysis.
I mean, they're the best analysts are people that didn't necessarily play the game.
But better apply to me because
there are people that know exactly what to do. I think about that all the time when they talk about George Foreman's comeback, and it's all these people that are like, can this old piece of trash do it? And he was like 2 years younger than I am right now. And it just makes me feel so ancient.
All right. This is always one of my favorite. Join the Nintendo.
What it is. Wait, can I say it?
Okay.
Join the Nintendo Fun Club today, Mac.
It's fun. I thought it was, okay, this is blowing my mind. I thought it was fan. It's fun. It's the Fun Club?
I mean, did I get it wrong?
No, we're reading from the same source, and
I'm not reading from it. I don't have it up.
What?
That's in my brain. I've been waiting for you to bring that one up.
So, I mean, I will trust super nerd Jeff May and super nerds on the internet punch out. You might have written this article, Jeff, for all we know, with how much we're showing the game. It's Fun Club. I did not know that. I'm glad I let you say it. I would have said fan and you would have corrected me.
Yeah.
Or I could admit it. Now everybody knows regardless. All right. For you, this would have been useful. Don't give up, Max. He has a weakness. King Hippo intermission. Now, why he didn't tell you that before the first round is questionable, but, useful. 4 left, Joe. We're almost there.
4 left. All right.
Okay. Don't give up, Mac. Make him close his big mouth. Big Hippo again. Why didn't he tell you that ahead of time? His father was a great magician in India. Don't be charmed by his magic punches.
That I got a lot when I was fighting.
You never put him away in the first round? The King?
No. I mean, when I was an actual boxer, my coaches used to tell me that all the time.
They're all those really great Indian boxers that use magic. That's
all those light heavyweight Indian boxers, that
use magic.
Yeah.
I do remember Great Tiger. I never knew the trick, which was you just block and he hits you and then he eventually is dizzy and you punch him in the face.
I figured that went out really quickly, actually.
I never figured that out. I actually remember thinking about the game off cycle, right? This is one of the first games where I was like thinking about it, like how I could do it and like how to dodge right. I remember that. Anyway, 2 left. Mac watches bull charge, then stand up to him. Again, he knows the secrets to these guys, but he doesn't tell you before round 1. That's kind of interesting.
He last one, hit him in the gut. Don't stand up to him.
That's standing up to him.
That's too, I guess that's too cryptic. If he's like stand up to him, I'd like watch him charge, just be like, I'm not afraid of you, as I get an uppercut that takes my head off my goddamn neck.
Yeah, and retires you. I mean, that's definitely. Last one, look for 2 types of spin punch. Watch him. This is in regards to Super Macho Man. All right. I briefly, that went a little longer than I thought, but definitely good boxing advice. I've got through everything, Jeff, and I know we're at time. So do we want to do the wind down?
Let's do it. Folks, if you enjoyed this, by all means, please check out Punch Out or Mike Tyson's Punch Out. It's a very fun game if you've never played it. If you did, I like that. I like that a lot. And hopefully we're going to be doing more of these. I love these deep dives into these retro games that were so important to me growing up. Punch Out might be the most important vintage game that I've ever played. It's something that I've played lovingly my entire life since I got it. I still play it to this day. It's a nice thing to plug in and get with. I found myself liking it so much and being obsessed with boxing that I started doing it in college. Like I loved it, and I really do enjoy this. And the history behind it and sort of like how it came about because of a glut of monitors is, like necessity breeds invention. And this is great. I love that. I love that a lot. I think necessity is the mother of invention. Is the correct one?
That's a good invention. You should patent that, trademark it. Start putting it on shirts. Jeff
Lands. I'm really glad to have done this. This is great, and it really is something to clear the air about why it went from Mike Tyson's Punch Out to Punch Out. I think is important. A lot of people misunderstand that history of it. The speed running aspect of it was wild. Seeing how fast some people were beating this game. watching the videos and watching people do it and seeing people like lose their minds over it was really exciting. I'm into it. I love it. So if you liked that and you want to check out more stuff from me, you can check out Jeff Has Cool Friends, which is available for free everywhere. But if you wanted a week early with uncensored episodes and bonus content, you can head on over to patreon.com/JeffMate for that. The aforementioned Ugg Fine with Kim Crawl, as well as more things coming along their way. I try to do as much as I can. For that, you can also check out Tom and Jeff Watch Batman on the Gamefully Unemployed Network, as well as Unpopular Opinion and You Don't Even Like Sports, both on the Unpops Network. Dre, what about you?
All right. Well, actually starting to get back in the groove. If you go to the Box Score Geek show, you can find that iTunes, Stitcher, wherever fine podcasts are found. Every 2 weeks, myself and Brian Foster will release an episode on basketball. So that's back. Happy to be back in the groove.
Welcome back,
also,
baby.
This has definitely got me interested. So on the off weeks on twitch.tv/RicksterGT, this is usually Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which would be tonight, but that doesn't help any of you in the future.
We'll be as of recording. So
yeah, we'll be playing Mega Man 4. So you can see who won that. I'm currently down 2-1. I lost Mega Man 1. I lost Mega Man 3. I won Mega Man 2. So if I want any hope of tying the series, I need to win Mega Man 4 today. Find me on Twitter as Nerdduppers. And then, the foreseeable future, I can tell you on air, Jeff, is at least another couple months as the world keeps going good. As long as my sincere hope is very much like Punch-Out. You get invested in other things and say you don't have time for it. And then also people in 10 years go, man, that nerd podcast with Jeff May was great. Why didn't he make more of that? And the secret is like, you had a million other more important things to do. That's the hope. But if that doesn't happen,
if you're doing this, if you're producing this show, this is important.
All right, I'll take it.
I make sure that you got to know that is very important. And again, you can also find me at Hey There Jeffro on Twitter and Instagram. And I'll be putting some stuff up on my YouTube, so you can check out that soon if you want to.
You have some boxing. Do you have some boxing stuff on your Instagram?
I don't. Oh, on my Instagram? Yeah, I post some boxing videos and stuff on my Instagram. Ironically, I'll be doing some unboxing stuff on.
Oh, very nice.
On YouTube. So we got that going for us.
That was pretty good. All right. Well, thanks so much. We'll see you next month.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Next month on Nerd, our hosts continue the trend of poorly adapted Nintendo characters that appeared in Captain N. The subject, Mega Man 2. If history repeats itself, the game will have a nostalgic history to both host with a slew of geeky knowledge to accompany it. Tune in to find out.